Started. I'd like to call the Finance Committee to order at 7:01. Members of the committee are Councilor Tavares, and Councilor Reynolds is not present tonight. And I'd like to welcome the Budget Director Mason forward, and also like to welcome the Auditor Deb here as well. Thank you, welcome. And I think we have the Health Department here first, so yeah, welcome. And there's that in our books.
Yeah.
I think we need brakes on these,
Yeah,
158,
there's no lock on
in
them.
the name of health.
Little room.
Doing page 158.
Thank you.
That helps.
Your books.
Page, one should have it by the page.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon.
Public Works.
Should be page 100. I think 158 is the salary
Thank
sheet.
you very much.
Sorry, my bad.
Page 100.
100, yep.
100, sorry.
The narrative, yep, of the whole budget.
We have to depress that to activate it.
So
Perfect.
just look at it, right?
Don't touch it. Gotcha.
Don't
Thank
touch
you.
it. Don't touch the button.
And whenever you're
Thank you
ready.
for the invite.
Yeah, absolutely. No, this is, hopefully, you've seen some of the other ones, and
Yeah.
this is great to just have each of the departments have a chance to come before us and talk a little bit about what they've done the previous year, what some upcoming, what's coming up for the
sure.
upcoming year, and some potential challenges or what their plan is with the upcoming budget. It should be painless. That's the intent, hopefully. So, with that said, welcome and go ahead.
Yeah, we just had a couple little tweaks. Besides the salaries, and of course, solid waste is the majority of this. Couple little tweaks that Beth's gonna tell you about on supplies and vaccinations, kind of trying to plan ahead with what might be coming down the road over the next several months, and being prepared for it. And I do know Allison Brum, our nurse, public health nurse, has plans to do a vaccination clinic, perhaps with some other surrounding communities and some state help, so that's just another thing. Other than that, it's, Beth, you wanna?
All right, I'll do the simple budget first. I don't know if you have it, it starts with personnel services.
Okay.
Okay, most of that section is contractual. So any of the changes, it's because somebody's been there a little bit longer, or we have another staff member. So that's the increases on that. And I'm gonna go back and forth because some of this is just my health department, and some of it is simply solid waste. We didn't have any increases in the vehicle maintenance, and we didn't have any increases in professional services, which is my two food inspectors that handle all the food inspections for the city of Attleboro. Did you want to go and talk about this? Really aren't any.
Why don't you do all of yours?
Okay,
now?
so this is actually part of the solid waste department of the health department. There are changes, but this all has to do with contractual agreements too. It went from $620,000 to $686 and change. And the fuel premium really knocked us out this year, so that's why we asked for the $89,640,000. And the white metal, again, prices are going up, even to get rid of something that's worth money. They don't make the same amount of money like they used to in the old days when they return metal. And then the waste recycling, which is $1,956,000, is now up to $2,614,000, and that is contractual too. What is this here?
That's a prevailing wages
Oh.
with the waste management. I'm going to go over all this
Okay,
anyway.
these next two, she's gonna go over in the next section for the solid waste. But the other thing, the other information I wanted to go through was our health officer, Dr. Quinn. He stayed at a level budget. The certifications, they went from, Mason and I had a discussion between the certifications and the health supplies and the, what's the other one? Sorry, I knew what it was before. But we made a change to divide the recommendations for the amounts that would match specifically what the definition was of the office supplies. Office supplies, we really needed the $2,000 because we use so many office supplies. We're always buying paper, we're always buying anything that has to do with the office. Fax machine, we definitely needed 150 because every once in a while you do have to change the cartridges. Even though it's old-fashioned, we have some people that they only send us a fax. Health supplies, we had it, see right here, at $2,600, and we dropped it down to $500, which kind of balances out the $2,000 that we have for the recommended for the supplies, office supplies. And then the vaccinations, my nurse is, her intent is to get anybody in this city vaccinated appropriately, especially where we have the migrants. There's so many people that are very poor and can't afford to go to the doctors and pay for an appointment. And her goal is to basically make sure the city is safe with the proper vaccinations. And then the last page, page 3, is we have the total capital overlay for my department is the 92,000, which is which is exempt from the solid waste department, which are the two.
That was from back in '23, so there's nothing in '24 or '25.
Yeah, so they don't even see this?
outlay. So they can see, that's in the year
Yeah.
to date, so we're talking about the '25, and then in
Okay.
'24, there's nothing for capital outlay.
Yeah, so we don't have anything to request. We got the new vehicles and we're all set.
Thanks, Beth.
And so can you talk a little bit about the bag fee increase?
Well,
in-
that would be Cheryl.
Okay.
That's her
Did-
forte.
So as far as Beth's accounts with, so because solid waste falls under the health department, a lot of the stuff is in the same grouping. So Cheryl will speak to the solid waste program, which,
Okay.
and the bag fee. Beth's reclassification really of some of the stuff is more adjustments to make sure that the things are properly accounted for in the right account, right? So
Yes.
historically, people in the department might have been using health supplies for something that Beth and Mason went through and said, you know what, that's really not a health supply, even though it's being used for health services, it's more accurate to call it an office supply. So that's some of the stuff that
Okay.
Beth just touched on. Her piece of this budget is really pretty straightforward. It's, they're both really straightforward, but the one that is significantly greater in both amount and complexity is Cheryl's for the solid waste piece. So,
Okay.
The only real new piece, sorry, Counselor, the only real new piece is the staff development. So there's just some, for certain qualifications and conferences that we'd be looking to send, certain employees to in fiscal '25. That line didn't used to be in the health budget, so that's been added. When that request came in, Beth had put that in the certification line. That's why you see a reduction there. We were trying to, basically it's for training and professional development. We wanted it to go in the proper line. And then, like Deb said, there was essentially some shifts from this office supplies and the health supplies. That's really kind of the only real changes in terms of Beth's accounts. And then everything else is obviously very driven by the solid waste. So, Cheryl, one question.
Council Waterman?
I just wanted to clarify for a second. When you were talking about the vaccinations and the goals to vaccinate everyone in the city that may need that, do you feel this is enough to accomplish that purpose?
Yes,
So
and she does get other funds from other programs she's part of to help out with the state.
There's an additional revolving fund that's in that packet. So if you flip a couple pages in the year-to-date, you'll see the Board of Health vaccinations account. That's also where a lot of the funding comes through for vaccines.
I saw that. I just wanted to clarify that we don't run short on that.
Right.
It's very important.
She monitors it very well. She does a great job,
and
very conscientious.
if I may, certain vaccinations, are they in the Commonwealth, are still provided to
Yes.
the Department of Public
At no
Health for
charge.
free at no charge?
Yes.
So there's certain vaccinations that we, as a city, receive, and then the administrative cost of that is something that comes from here, or these might be specialty vaccines, and then there is the revolving fund that is available, and that's one of the votes the council will make as it relates to the upper limit on that for expenditures.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Council Tavares. I may have missed something on the fuel line item, but does that represent close to 100% increase, or is there some other details there?
I'm going to get into that.
Oh, okay.
In
All right,
just a
sorry.
couple of minutes. That's
Okay,
part of the
okay.
solid waste
Yeah, yeah,
budget.
sorry.
My question was more on the salary. It looks like 14,000, a little less than requested. Is it based on the figures here at least? So requested versus recommended, looks like a $14,000 difference.
So originally when the budgets were entered, there was a position, an outreach worker, that was a full-time position. So that's been shifted down to a part-time position. So we had a vacancy in the position, administratively, we decided it should be returned back to the way the position used to be funded, which was in a part-time capacity. It's something, it may not be a permanent decision for the city. We want to see basically how that position kind of develops, the services that can be offered, and kind of see where the position goes. But that's sort of the net difference there.
Perfect, thank you.
As a follow-up, is that the social work position you're referring to?
Case outreach worker,
So that's different?
yes.
Okay.
The social work position will be funded from the opioid settlement fund, so that's in addition to.
Okay, thank you. I want to be
The
confused
city
on
really
that.
needs.
Absolutely. This is more outreach and case management, not necessarily social work case management, but outreach, connecting people to different resources,
Right.
things like
And
that.
they will work together eventually. It's very important that we have those services.
Absolutely.
City of Attleboro.
You have to convince me.
Thank you.
Anything else before we move on? All right, do you want to move on to?
I am the solid waste manager, and I work out of the health department, but I work in the rubbish and recycling office in City Hall. We are entering the last year of a 5-year contract for rubbish and recycling collection and disposal. We were recently awarded a technical assistance grant from Mass DEP for the project Contracting for Solid Waste and Recycling Services. This will help provide us with up to 80 hours of hands-on assistance with the process of obtaining a new contract, doing an RFP for a new contract. There will more than likely be a large increase going into a new contract next year. We are hopeful with the assistance from DEP and doing an RFP, it will ensure a competitive process by comparing different vendors' offerings and prices. So I passed out the solid waste budget. Some of you might not have seen this spreadsheet before. I'll explain it a little bit to you, and then I'm going to just go over the highlights pretty much. So as you're looking at it, the yellow section on the left is all the figures in fiscal year 2024, and the blue to the right is all 2025. Okay. The top half, the top paragraph is the general fund, because the solid waste budget is broken down between the revolving account and the general fund. So the top half, total general government revenue, that's all the revenue that we collect. And then, that's our expenses. So that's our expenses, and then our revenue, and then below that is the revolving side, where it says total revolving fund revenue. And that's all our expenses that going into the second page. So this budget is presented while keeping the same levels of services for residents at the recycling and compost center. There are several increases and decreases to different line items in the solid waste budget. The main increase is contractual with Waste Management. The Waste Management contract represents $294.86 of the proposed $325 user fee. This is an increase of $25 over last year's rate and with a 50-cent increase on the city trash bag. So I'm going to highlight some of the increases and decreases in the budget. So for increases, our waste management collection costs increased $302,076 over last year. That's $20.13 on the rate and a 13% increase. Our fuel increased $42,120 from last year. That's $2.86 on the rate. This is all by contract, and that's an 89% increase on the rate. The rubbish disposal costs, that's increasing $3 a ton, so we're going to $98 a ton. That's a 3% increase, and the total increase is determined by the amount of tonnage. Recycle and contamination, that increased by $23,473.40. That's a 67% increase. And this is based on an increase to the rate of $6.07 and the amount of contamination that went up based on our last audit in December of '23. We went from a 12.1% to 15% contamination on our recycling. And we pay a contamination charge based on anything over 10%.
May I?
Counselor Foer?
Contamination.
So that is anything that's in the recycling bin that doesn't belong there. We have an audit once a year with Waste Management. It's a 2-week audit where they pull the trucks from every day's trash, every day's recycling, and they empty it on the floor, and they go through it, pull out the contaminants, weigh it based on the size of the truck, and we get a contamination rate for the 2 weeks.
And can you now say again what the contamination rate?
So we don't pay anything, so we get a 10% break, and we pay anything over 10%. Last year, well, right now, we're at 12.1%, so we pay 2.1% on contamination. Now we're going to be at 15%, so we're going to be paying at 5% contamination. We had a 40-pound pair of brake rotors in one of the days, which really hurt us.
Break rooms.
I don't even know what that is, but that's all right.
They're two big metal items.
It's
that were-
inappropriate, I get that.
Yeah, and that really hurt us, but overall, it ended up being 15%.
This is why we have a waste enforcement program, right? Because ultimately, there's a direct cost to the ratepayer if, people are acting in or bad faith or doing the wrong thing, right? So that's part of the reason for having waste enforcement, is to try to limit these, these contamination rates.
People hide things.
Can you say that again? On the week that we were so correct me if I'm wrong, the period when we were being audited, it just so happened that somebody threw a pair of brake rotors in their recycling bin. Selfishly,
Yes.
it then threw off our weight, and it now is costing all the residents for their one selfish act.
It's not a weight.
So it's a weight. Yeah, it's a weight. So yes, that's true. And
As
we don't know,
disgusting.
that may happen. Other times, we don't even know it's happening. If it's at the bottom of the green bin, we're not going to know if that happens.
Yep.
I put a picture on Facebook with it.
And I'm sorry, you're sitting right next to me, and
Yeah,
sometimes
no.
I can't see you, so
No problem.
my apologies.
No, it's fine. I mean, I can't imagine one set of brake rotors brought it from 10% to 15%.
No, but
It's gonna be
that's-
a collection of a lot of
But
other
that
stuff.
just helped, that
Yeah.
40-pound weight just.
Yeah. Another question is when they do the audit, does the city have a representative there?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yep. One of us from the department go every day.
And you
Because-
actively dispute you know,
Yes.
some of the right? So they're actively, you know, disputing feedback, and they'll come back and do other testing.
Yeah, first thing we do is we look at mail, we look at what's in there, because a lot of times we'll see, oh, that isn't Attleboro's trash, that's Sharon, or we see other towns' mail. And then a couple of times we had to leave because they didn't even have the right trash, and we have to go back another day. So, yeah, we inspect everything, we go over, question everything with them. There's always somebody there. Not a pretty sight.
Is there one,
Yeah, I got you.
I'm sorry,
No, you're fine, you go.
is there one kind of thing that Attleboro routinely misdisposes?
So if I was going to say, probably food waste.
Oh,
Yeah, some food waste, because even if it's like a jar of peanut butter that has peanut butter inside of it and it isn't completely cleaned out, it's contaminated. It's not completely cleaned out.
so your new program might help with that.
Plastic bags, that isn't a big weight, but we're still getting plastic bags, even though they're banned in Attleboro. Metal, you know, just any type of metal that doesn't belong in there. Just things have changed so much, and the waste reduction person goes out and tries to talk to the people to explain what the problem is. Like, we'll leave a door hanger at first, right on there what the problem is. Like orange juice containers, the Tropicana, that carton, that can't go in the recycling anymore. It's only the bottles and cans only, not the waxed part of a container.
Even though it has the plastic screw top, it's
Yep,
not.
even though it has that, and even though it says recycling, there's a lot of things say recycling, but they're not recyclable where a single string goes. Yeah, Attleboro or any of the towns.
And do we have the capability of ever requesting like a secondary audit following that? It just seems kind of crazy to me that the two brake rotors, but I mean, I know not the full amount, but something that they're gonna take and scrap and make money on, not marginally a lot of money, but that throws off the rate on that audit. Seems kind of crazy.
So that particular day's audit was like the highest % of contamination on that for the 2 weeks. I did ask them if they would take one away, you know, like do 9 instead of 10 and take our highest one away, but they wouldn't do it.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks,
I'm just going to say, so to me, that's a really good question that I just made a note so that when we work with
New contract.
a new contract, that's something that I would say like, hey, what's our approach for this? And we'll get the assistance from DEP. Because to me, like, that's, you know, can they throw the high and the low out? Like, what can we do to average it out other than increased education, right? So lots of folks see your meetings. It might be, you know, we go back to the recycling minute of 30 years ago where, remember, folks, this isn't recyclable, right? Like,
And these are the kinds of things, even in the first meeting that we had with DEP, you know, they know the things to look for in the contracts. That was very clear. There were things that we were learning on the spot. It's like, hey, these are things to look out for. They already had recommendations of, you know, you should take this approach, and, you know, they have templates that have been successful for a lot of communities. And I think it's definitely a learning process, and I think these are the kinds of things we're taking notes on and saying, hey, we've had issues with this, like, how do we mitigate this going forward?
can
To
we
Deb's
get,
point, if we can write that in, because as they write in a premium for gas on their side of things.
right, so that, Dr. Quinn, that's exactly what Mason was alluding to. When the folks from DEP who do these over and over again, these contracts, and really are the experts with the eye for that, you know, like, I'm sure they're going to suggest stuff like that, but anything that we think of like that, to say to them, well, what about this? How can we do this better? So I was pretty hopeful. I mean, it will be a long process and it will take the year. The results might be the same, right? That we end up having more costs, but I think we'll at least go through the whole process competitive, you know, what can we do? Where can we improve upon it? And they were very helpful. Just in that one meeting, I thought, oh, wow.
can we do any more media to let everybody know again? City webpage, Facebook page, mailing.
Contamination.
That might be more focused, not like a whole broad one, but maybe more focused to our main issues and, okay, this is good, this is not good, and just maybe
Definitely, yep,
Cheryl, that's been in mailings in the past, bills.
once a year.
yeah.
Yeah,
Pictures are good too on Facebook, like pictures about the contamination, what can't go in there.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Cope. It's one thing not really budget, so I apologize, but one thing I'd love to see too is maybe even a sticker for the side of the barrels or the back of the barrels, kind of outlining some of those items. If a piece of paper might get lost, people might not put it on the fridge, but something on that bin that they're opening to put an object in, it might be beneficial. And one comment too is I know many aren't, but I'm pretty excited looking into this next cycle because I think, whereas we haven't had a lot of competition, there's a lot of bigger companies and newer companies coming into the area. The waste is something I deal with every day. So I know of a lot of the newer companies, so I'm pretty optimistic and excited. I know that it might still increase, but years past, we haven't had really any competition. So the concept of competition is always good on the city's behalf.
You actually do the stickers, right? If someone's
So
in violation.
we do.
Yeah,
We
it's
have
right on the barrel.
a big sticker that has everything on it about contamination, but she puts those on the bad barrels. We don't, but that's something we could do for our next contract is, because those green barrels right now are owned by Waste Management. So if we didn't go with Waste Management, we'd have to get new green barrels. The blue ones we own. Couple more lines. So a couple more increases. So we increased the capital line by $10,000, and that's to budget for a future vehicle. We increased our heat account by $4,641. This is for the recycling center building, and this is based on the price of propane gas. It's a 77% increase. And lastly, we increased the capital line for recycling and compost center for the next phase by $40,000. A lot of you know the wastewater department is going to be taking back their own space in the foreseeable future, possibly 2029 or through 2032. So we're starting to budget for a future site. We're right in the middle of a feasibility study on locating a new site in the city right now. So decreases, what we've decreased. We decreased our grinding account by $44,425, which is a 26% decrease. We decreased an overtime account by $1,000. That was a 50% decrease. We decreased an overtime account for hazardous waste programs by $4,000. That was a 22% decrease. I just wanted to make a note, we are no longer able to fund the recycling enforcement coordinator position with our Mass DEP RDP grant funds. This position will be funded in the solid waste budget in fiscal year 2025. However, there are other allowable expenses in the budget that will be paid out of the RDP grant account to offset this change. The next four accounts we decrease, they're on the basis we will be utilizing our RDP grant funds to subsidize these accounts. So our hazardous material disposal account, $23,072.80. We will be using RDP grant funds towards this account next year. We decreased our additional solid waste account by $6,500. We will be using RDP grant funds if we need to purchase more next year. And this is just new cots we buy for new homeowners that move in. That's what that line is for. We decreased recycling toter account by $10,000. We can use our RDP grant funds if we need to purchase more next year. And we decreased our pay-as-you-throw bag program account by $30,545.60. And we'll be using RDP grant funds towards that account next year. So in figuring the cost of the city bags, the city bag costs $2. It's 43 cents to make the bag, and it's $1.46 to dispose of the contents in that bag, for a total of $1.89. So $2 minus the $1.89, that leaves 11 cents for other services in the program. By proposing a $2.50 bag, if you take away the $1.89 for the disposal of the bag and the cost to make the bag, that leaves 61 cents. So we would have 61 cents towards other services in our program. And what are other services in our program that this city bag pays for? Grinding at the compost center, overtime for compost in the recycling center, waste management, yard waste collection, a portion of our recycle processing fee, hazardous material disposal, our annual rubbish cart costs, supplies for recycling at the compost center, our shops kiosk program, and capital improvements, and the city trash bags. So the difference in the budget by keeping the bag at $2 or the $2.50 is $88,100 on the budget, between the $2 or the $2.50. If we keep the bag price the same at $2, we would have to increase the rate another $6 to $331. The higher bag rate of $2.50 would only affect the higher volume user. That's all I have.
Council LaVoy?
Have we ever looked into other potential revenue streams through the recycling center? Like allowing landscapers to dump there for an annual fee, something like that. Generally speaking, the higher volume user is going to be a family. And so, we're just going to keep putting more and more onto the family each year, and we're going to increase the rubbish rate alongside charging more for the bag. So, just seems kind of harsh.
So I know in the past, we did let landscapers in there. It wasn't cost effective. We had so much compost with the landscapers coming in, and the cost to have it grinded was huge. It wasn't working out. So the previous health agent stopped allowing landscapers in. It's only for residential use, because now that's going to grind up your grinding account. So if that's something we were going to pursue, we'd have to see what we would actually charge them then.
So far.
Can one of you describe to me this new organics curbside collection program? That seemed rather exciting to me and
So
advanced.
we just started a drop-off with Black Earth compost at our recycling center. And residents right now can drop off, they can bring down their food waste. It's even more than food waste, it's bones and shells and all kinds of stuff. We have a list of everything besides food waste. And you drop it off inside the 2 green bins we have there, and it gets picked up once a week. We currently have little kitchen buckets we're giving away. The first, I believe it's 25 or 50 for free for people that come down, but they sell for $5 each. They're a cute little 2-gallon bucket. We're trying to push the curbside program. We need 200 people signed up. We're at 161. So hopefully soon we can start a curbside program. If we do go to the curbside program, the city is going to pay for, out of our grant, a startup program, which will consist of the barrel. It's like an 18-gallon barrel with the bags to get them going. But the cost for that will be between the resident and Black Earth. But the idea is hopefully people won't have to buy the city bags for their food waste if they're using the curbside. We're also trying to partner with North Attleboro, because they want to have enough users before they come, and they're doing the same exact thing as us. They're just launching theirs. So as soon as she gets her buckets in and she gets going, we're going to contact to see if they would start earlier, since they could do the same day between Attleboro and North Attleboro.
They being the contractor?
Yes, the Black Earth.
Right, thank you.
I think we're good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
You
thank
good
you very
questions.
much.
Excellent. Who do we have up next? I don't have the. DPW?
$1,000 for this.
Public Works.
Perfect.
Public Works.
Probably can't hear you.
So,
Hey, Mike.
Mike?
The Public Works narrative is going to be on page 92, and then the snow and ice removal narrative is just right behind it.
Welcome.
Good evening, Chairman Gomez and members of the City Council and City Auditor, Deb Gould. Nice to see you. Just kind of thinking about the irony of this situation. I'm in one room of the school tonight trying to get as much money as I can, and then I come over to this room and trying to hold on to as much money as I can. So, definitely different, but thanks for having us tonight.
Yeah. Take us away.
So I only want to really touch on the highlights, and then obviously answer any questions that anybody in the council has or the city auditor has. I think Mason and I have kind of worked on this quite a bit. You're going to see in the salary and wage line, we're making the motion to defund the seasonal salary position. That was just a person we hired for during the summer that was doing GIS mapping for us. We're kind of taking a break right now and decide where we want to go next year to pick that up. So we're proposing to delete that line this year. One of the other concerns you might see is in the overtime. We basically started off the year at 30,000. We're close to 50,000 right now. Those costs can almost be directly related to the 3 flooding events that we had. So traditionally during the during the winter, we were able to operate under the snow and ice removal budget. This winter was not that type of winter. The floods seem to be the worst, so we're hoping it's not a new enemy coming. I do firmly believe that it probably is. But we certainly didn't want to tie money up on that budget line, not knowing, trying to predict what the weather's going to be like in the future. Our service lines was kind of a little different this year. We increased the heating by $12,000, increased the lights and power by $2,000. And increased maintenance of vehicles to $2,100. So the increase in heating is basically just the higher costs. Not much we can do about it. This building is one of the most insane buildings you'll ever want to see at 101 Lane Street. Those heating bills can go from almost $10,000 a month down to $300. So just when we hit that area where we get around April or May, I mean, the decline is incredible. I'm sure it's tied to the number of air exchanges that are required in that building, with it being on a brownfield site. But I think Mason and I made the decision that we were going to try to do internal transfers until we could get a handle on that. I think we've done that. The maintenance of vehicles, we're asking for an increase in that, because if you actually looked at the line, $6,000 of that just goes towards my inspection stickers for the year. So it really leaves me with very, very little. So we're able to do a lot of work in-house since the city council bought us the diagnostic machine a couple of years ago. The guys have gotten really good with it. We're saving a lot of money with it, because right now, anytime you take one of the larger trucks or whatever up to Allegiance or something like that, it's $500 as soon as you walk in the door. So we're asking for a little bit of buffer zone there, only because realistically, by the time I'm done paying for my inspection stickers, I have about less than $1,000 left. It's just not realistic. We are asking for a decrease in the street painting to $15,000 for reasons that we'll talk about in a little bit. There is some other funding sources that we can possibly have for them. And that was actually the line, because I know Todd's going to ask me that. He's going to say, you took all that money out of the line painting. So we took the money out of the line painting to pay for the heating, the lights and power, all the unexpected overcosts that we had, with the intent of coming back to the city council at the end of this month, most likely, and asking for a transfer out of our wage line to put it back into street line painting. So the rationale behind that was we're really not going to do line painting until probably July or August anyway, somewhere in that area. The rain has been like every other day. So it's just not possible. I haven't even got my sweepers out yet. That's supposed to start next week. So you'll see that coming in front of you very shortly, where we're going to ask for a transfer out of the wage line, which requires city council approval. So we do we do know the importance of the line painting. I can't stand before you one year and say it's very important, the next year say, well, we just took all the money out of it. But that is the intent of what we do moving forward. We also had a decrease in the maintenance of buildings by $6,000. It just really hasn't cost us a lot of money this year. So we're trying to stay within, we're not trying to pull numbers out of the air. If that's what it's actually costing us for the year, then we're gonna try to pile that number down to that. As you all know, the building's only about 9 years old. It doesn't have many deficiencies.
That's also related to, we've shifted expenses to proper account lines, right? So it's not really a decrease. There's been funds shifted to the HVAC services line, the electrician line, this is consistent with what we talked about previously throughout the budget, where we're trying to be more transparent about where those costs are going. So that's really where that's been shifted to.
Thank you, Mason. Absolutely. That, gets to my next point, the professional service line. Professional services, when I first came on 6 years ago, was $50,000. And then all of a sudden, we put a little increase to it to about $65,000, something around there, $6,250 or whatever. Those were the costs of the mandated dam inspections. So we have no choice with these. They're mandated by the state, and these are specifically on the Farmers Pond Dam and the Mechanics Pond Dam. So the condition of those dams has really not gotten much better, even though we did some remediation work. So the state puts them in a higher classification, and the costs go up. So that means they have to do that many more inspections a year. The engineering company that we have on contract, obviously from going from a semi-annual has to go to 4 or 5 times a year over there. The costs are going up. Right now, it's $28,500. So that really put a dent in my budget last year when I only had basically, $60-something thousand, and all of a sudden $28,000 was taken right out of it. So talking with Mason, we were like, this is a year-to-year cost we're gonna incur until the city makes a decision of what we wanna do with these dams. And it makes sense at a transparent effort to put it in a separate line so we can actually see what those numbers are instead of just coming on in the professional service line. Also, along with what Mason was alluding to, we have the survey camera, so that's kind of something that we're seeing a good need for now, especially when we're down in the Tomlinson area, where we had the flooding. We don't want to go in and spend and just start tearing things apart. We need to get the cameras in there. We need to see what's happening so we can make an educated plan moving forward. It broke it up into police details to give us a better indication of what those cost us a year, HVAC and electrical services, as Basin alluded to. Lastly, we, in our supply line, I'm trying to make it short because I know they were overrunning a little bit on the time, but there was an increase to gas and diesel of $40,000, $15,000 for gas, $25,000 for diesel. That's kind of reflecting the new reality of the cost and the usage of the fuel. So I think anybody that's been on city council knows I've come in front of you every year about this issue. So we're trying to be realistic about it. So that's kind of it. I'm trying to wrap it up a little bit, but that's, Mason, unless you have anything to add.
No, again, I think Mike put it perfectly, explaining kind of, we're trying to break out the professional services to be more transparent about where those costs are going. I think that's consistent across the budget. I think these are the estimates of looking at historically what we spent on those services each year, and then it makes it easier for Mike, he's got a lot of different professional services that he contracts for, to make sure that, if he knows he doesn't have enough funding for a certain service that he needs to do, it's a little bit easier for him to identify that, so that hopefully we're not coming back for certain funding for things that need to happen. The survey camera work is a good example. With the flooding this year, there was some work that needed to be done, and that really should be, it's likely needed every year. When we spoke, we kind of broke that out. Hopefully that'll be enough going forward. It's,
Everybody's guess.
Who's in charge of I&I remediation? Is that within your department?
that would be wastewater.
Wastewater.
Inflow and infiltration.
The repair of broken pipes, broken facilities, whatever.
There's kind of split responsibility. So when it comes to the wastewater system, that's, there's a piece specific to wastewater. There's also, stormwater management that's kind of managed both the NIPD's pieces. Some comes through DPW, some of the management and the studies, et cetera, come through the planning department as well as Concom, or conservation agent. It's kind of spread responsibilities, I would say. That NIPD's line you saw in the budget this year, that's related to the permit that needed to happen in this year, but that's not a recurring expense going forward. But there's certainly pieces you guys are doing with the drainage systems,
There is the requirements that come up, NIPD's is NIPD's, believe it or not, has been around for almost 18 years. I think when the federal government first put this in, and it was just no enforcement of it. They put it out there, see what you're gonna get out of it. It's only the last couple of years where they said, we've given everybody enough time now, because it's very extensive, and what they want the stormwater and wastewater and all those systems to look like. So they're finally getting serious after all this time. It's going to be an expensive proposal moving forward, but Attleboro's different in one aspect because you have two separate lines. So your stormwater and your sewer are completely separate lines. So that's huge. Not all communities actually have that, believe it or not. And illicit discharge connections is another part of it. I think Attleboro's pretty well prepared for it, but there's certainly going to be costs moving forward. And as Mason said, it's going to be each department's responsibility to make sure that we're doing our piece of whatever that entails.
Councilor Waterman?
Yes, Mike, can you address the street maintenance part, which I went from 50,000 to 52? What is that covering?
So that was a professional service line.
Okay.
So the professional service line, as we were talking, it used to include everything that we did professional service. Could be police details. Like I said, if I had a vac truck that had to come in or a camera truck. At one point, the dam inspections were in there. So it just makes perfect sense to separate those to see what our costs are going to be moving forward. Because 50,000 was not going to hit that number, like I alluded to earlier. So if I had 50, I think it was 62.5, Mason, I'm saying.
So I think
That I had in the budget, and then immediately get the new quote for the dam inspections, and it's 28,500. So it just took half of my budget away for the year.
I think, Counselor, I think you were asking about the supply line for street maintenance, correct? The 5.5 account?
Well, I wasn't sure what that was exactly covering.
I'm sorry.
The 5.5 account, the supplies, the street maintenance
Yes,
supplies.
it's under supplies, yeah, which is on a different page where it says supplies.
553010, Mike. This year you had 52,500. You requested 50,000, and the recommendation from the administration is 47,500. In your current budget, you've spent 41,705, have 10,631 encumbered, and $162 unexpended. Your street maintenance supplies, you're just your regular budget,
I'm sorry, which line are we in, Deb?
553010.
Correct.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, the street maintenance line here. Okay, I got you. I'm sorry, Ty, so I answered the wrong question. So that covers everything that we do in-house in the city. So that could be resetting catch basins, all supplies that we require to do work in the roadways that are not part of a Chapter 90 project or one of those. So these are basically city funds, so projects that the state will not pay for. The state will not pay for maintenance of our roadways. They don't allow that. So if there's just a catch basin broken down, a drainage pipe broken, a sidewalk, a little section of sidewalk that has to be done, a little section of roadway that has to be done that doesn't meet the requirements of Chapter 90, that's where all that money comes out of. That's what that 50,000 is for. So we try to, it's actually a very low number for all the work that we get out of it.
That's what I was thinking.
It's a very low number. But, the city's really been focusing on the last couple of years of doing some pretty major improvement projects in the city, as far as sidewalks and resurfacing and all that. I think, as you know, the city council probably spent about $3 million in sidewalks over the last couple of years. I know we had the $1 million resurfacing. So that helps us, maintain the roads and the sidewalks better. It's kind of an unrealistic number at $50,000, I'll be honest with you. It's just for the small stuff, the very small stuff. We do have the ability, if it's a bigger project, a drainage project or something like that, where there's over, 100 and something feet of pipe that need to be replaced, that is Chapter 90 eligible, we would apply for the state. So I think we're trying not to take up funds that we don't anticipate a need for. And then if we do have a need, then it's my job to sit down with Mason and figure out, and Deb, and figure out how we're going to get this thing funded. So that's basically, it's for every other little thing that we do in the maintenance of the streets that's not funded by the state or federal government.
And there's also been recent increases to the state's Chapter 90 allocation to the city through, the additional revenues coming in through the surcharge, the income surcharge tax, or what people call the millionaire's tax. So we had an additional allocation of, I believe it was about 600,000.
600,000.
So there's additional funds coming into the city, which we anticipate going forward for, these larger projects, the resurfacing, et cetera, the maintenance of those roads and sidewalks.
That's correct. That's correct, yep. And we hope to see it keep coming tonight, to be honest with you, because as I said in front of this council many times, before even when you talk about resurfacing, we could do about 3 miles of road a year with the money that we received in our Chapter 90. It's only $1.2 million a year for everything. As Mason alluded to, they gave us a $600,000 increase, so it's 1.8. The only downside to that is the cost of materials and labor in the last 3 years or 4 years since COVID hit is just gone through the roof. So right now, instead of 3 miles, we're down to about 2 miles that you can do. So, we're always looking ways to get the money to spread further and looking for revenue sources. But it's certainly getting tougher. It's certainly getting tougher.
But we're finally going to get all of Lindsay Street, and that's longer than 2 miles, right?
Right. But, even doing water main projects, so now you got a street like Lindsay Street that's in I don't even like mentioning, I don't like driving down it with a city vehicle because everybody's just kind of wondering what this guy's doing here because it's atrocious. But they're going to put a new water main down it, and then we're going to get a brand new road after. So, the same thing is going to happen with Bishop Street that we did in Reed Street. So I think the city's looking at it in a way where there's other funding sources to get this work done. But it's also a big benefit to the city when it's done. You got a brand new water main, a brand new roadway, and realistically, the city hasn't really dolled out that much, so.
That's being paid for by ARPA funds.
Well, so I should probably clarify that the full pavement restoration isn't necessarily being paid for by ARPA funds. That's something that we've kind of talked about before. We'll have to come back at some point for additional funds. But the replacement, the temporary trench paving, et cetera, is being covered through those funds. And if we can, we'll try to stretch those funds as much as we can for pavement restoration.
Clarification.
Councilor Four.
Do you have a plan each year for what roads, streets you hope to reach?
So we do.
And is that something you might make public?
There's a little issue with that, because there's only one person in the city who can decide what roads or what sidewalks actually get done when you're talking Chapter 90 money, and that's the mayor. So I will say, in the 6 years that I've been here, the list that I've put in front of the former administration, this administration, have been approved 100%. They haven't deviated from it whatsoever, and I thank them for taking my professionalism about that, which one should be or which one shouldn't be. We have to share that list anyways. Every year, we have to send that out to the utility companies. That's the law. So they ask us for a list of roads that we plan on paving, where we're going to put sidewalks, so they can make sure if there's any gas work or any utility work in those areas that we can coordinate how that gets done. So it's a different question. We put it out there only after the mayor's approved, and you'll find it on the Public Works website. She just approved that, I think, about 3 weeks ago, so we're just working out the logistics of which streets are going to come first. So it's a difficult question to answer. The city council has the full authority over city funds that are being utilized. I mean, if you guys didn't want to put a sidewalk on Park Street, you guys could have voted that down. But when it comes to Chapter 90, it's realistically, it's up to the mayor.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we move on?
I think all of the specific accounts and the transfers and stuff and the new account numbers, they covered pretty nicely. So, snow.
I have one. Where would the millionaire's tax, the money from that, where is that shown in here?
It's not. That would be Chapter 90 money. So Chapter 90 is a special revenue fund. It's accounted for completely separate.
Okay.
What happens is the Department of Public Works, Mike, prepares, based on, we're gonna do sidewalks, he does a sheet, the sheet for sidewalks, that goes through a process between my office and the administration. We sign off on it, goes to DOT, DOT signs off on it, all of the stuff is accounted for separately, and at the beginning of the process, the procurement process, purchasing is involved through Mason's office to make sure that the vendors are used are appropriate vendors, they have to meet certain qualifications with the Department of Transportation and District 5 Highway, and all of that is accounted for separately. We're certainly able to provide those to you separately if you want them. We'll send you a report.
Well, just here is enlightening to
Yeah.
even know. I was not aware of that, so that's
So-
very good.
Yep, that's where that money is appropriated and goes into that account. Annually, the notice goes to the council about what the award is, and you authorize the expenditure of that award, and then that's all accounted for separately. And it's restricted funds, it can only be used for certain things. It's approved by DOT. If it was gonna be for engineering, Mike and his guys have to supply the engineering, a copy of the engineering contract. That has to get approved by Chapter 90. So there's a process involved in that.
Sure there is.
Yep.
Outstanding, Mike. Always a pleasure.
So snow. Touch base on snow? Sorry,
you very
Mike.
much.
Sorry, Mike.
Mike, we're gonna
We're
talk
gonna
about
talk
snow.
about snow.
Oh, I'm sorry. Slow. I'm just hoping he's winning multiple scholarships out there while I'm sitting there.
Yeah, we'll get you out of here
College is
fast.
expensive.
It is.
So just to preface, as you'll know from the budget presentation, the budget book, and the budget message, there wasn't a snow deficit number included in the budget, wasn't finalized at the time. The number in the year-to-date budget report that you see, the negative at the bottom right in available budget, that is a good number. So that is going to be the number that we'll be covering with available resources, being, the recommendation will be free cash within this fiscal year. There's no snow deficit to be raised, 2024 snow deficit to be raised in the 2025 budget. In the tax recap, that's not the intention. The intention is to cover in available resources. So you now have a good number in front of you. We'll be sending down a request shortly.
Thanks.
So I think I would just say one comment on the snow. I mean, because the last couple winters has not been very snowy, right? So we had one storm the previous year. We had 3 plowable events this year. So I think some people kind of look at the incentive program and go, is it really doing? The incentive program is saving the city of Attleboro. Right? The contractors, they can't survive on one storm. They just can't survive on one storm. They're not all these big construction companies like Waltz Construction, right? So he's got millions of dollars worth of insurance, liabilities, standard because of the business that he does. You get some other guys that just plow during the winter, or maybe a small landscaping company, and they have to put that form of extra insurance on there. And of course, if the plow breaks down, for God's sakes, these things cost hundreds up to thousands of dollars. So I just want to just put that out there. The incentive program can be, some people can look at it multiple different ways. Why are we paying people $1,000 and all this other? It's actually saving your program. These guys are actually, I'm sure at some point during the spring, they say, was that really worth it? But when they get a check for $1,000, I think then they turn around a little bit and say, all right, so I get it. So I just say, I wanted to throw that out there because I know there's a lot of various talks about that. There's less people willing to do it. We have to be competitive as a city. We have to be, we can't be the lowest one around the area because a lot of these guys, they don't care if they're plowing snow in Mansfield, Attleboro, or Rehoboth. So, don't want to get long-winded, but I just want people to know that is a very good program. And I can honestly tell you that Deb and I watch over it very well. Nobody's getting paid any money that's not supposed to be getting paid any money.
The incentive program is scrutinized closely.
Thank you. I just want to echo that I think the program's fantastic. I don't plow snow for any city, but I do know how competitive that is. I don't think people understand how competitive it is. Different cities will always elevate that payout to get providers when they're in a shortage, which every city is pretty much in a shortage every year. And worth noting, if your car insurance goes up, chances are a snow plow company's insurance probably went up 10 times that. So insurance in that industry is up so much every year. So, I mean, that's just, personally, I think we could almost do more to entice companies, but that's fantastic, so.
Just a quick comment. I just want to say, when you get I appreciate, all that you do, all that you take. You're incredibly responsive. I've been, on the council for 2.5 years, and it's just been a pleasure dealing with you, and I appreciate your professionalism and you having to listen to me and all that stuff and taking care of the issues. I think that I would like to say, I know the city appreciates it too, because your department does a great job. And so that's a reflection of you, obviously.
I appreciate that, Council Angel. We try. We
Great
certainly
job.
try.
Perfect. And now, I think we're good.
Very good.
All right.
Thank you.
And so we're running about half an hour behind schedule, but I appreciate it as always, and thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you,
Thanks,
Chairman.
Mike.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Scholarships. Next up is fire department. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you, Mason.
I would vote best dressed.
I think it's page 76.
76.
Better than me today, Chief. What are you doing?
Yeah.
I knew I'd be sitting next to you, Mason, so. Make sure.
Page 76 for the narrative, and then within that year-to-date packet, you have for the fire department, the general fund, and then you also have the 2610, which is the ambulance revolving account, and then the 2609, which is the fire alarm system, fire prevention.
You wait for me, Todd?
Whenever you're ready.
Okay, all right, yeah. I'm
Absolutely.
ready. So, it's good to be here again, thank you.
Yeah,
I
welcome.
Appreciate the opportunity to go over the fire department's budgetary needs. This is now my 14th budget as the chief, so it's the same process. I'm happy to go through everything line by line, but we'll be here till midnight. Typically, what I like to do is highlight the things that are different and the things that I expect that you guys are going to have questions on. I'm always available if you have any questions on something that we don't, get to tonight. Mason and I, worked together on this budget. I'm sure he said it was a challenging fiscal climate. I've really heard that every year since I've been chief, so it's really not anything that's much different. But one of the things I do want to commend the current administration for, really for the first time since I've been chief, we've been asked to ask for what we believe the department needs. And then if they can't do it, they're going to make, the difficult decisions and reduce things when it's necessary with a conversation. In the past, many years ago, that wasn't always the case, and we presented something that really wasn't an accurate reflection of what we needed. And I think it's much better for the department heads to be able to say what we need. And again, we all work collaboratively, so you'll see a handful of cuts. Generally speaking, there's nothing in there that I find troubling. Some of the cuts that were overtime, around $100,000, that would be the one that sticks out the most. Overtime is the one thing that I could talk about for 2 hours tonight and 10 hours tomorrow and continue to talk about it. But since there are some new counselors here that may not understand how our budget works, we get an allocation of overtime at the beginning of the fiscal year. We also have salary allocations. It's always contingent on the best-case scenario, which never happens, and one of the things we do is anticipate when we're going to hire new people. So right now, I'm in the process of hiring 7 firefighters. So on paper, you'll see in the budget, in the salary tables, you'll see 7 positions that says vacant, and they're being filled with the goal of July 1st. We already know that they're not going to be hired for July 1st. Civil service is a slow process. With the current process, we're trying to hire 7, and I have four candidates. So when you do the math, you can already see the problem. So what we end up doing throughout the fiscal year is we transfer money from salaries to overtime if we don't hire in time. The other part of it that's hard to kind of predict is injuries and long-term illnesses. So I've had several firefighters out, one from since COVID, or since COVID kind of went away. So I've had firefighters out for 2 to 3 years. They're being paid, and it's not their fault that the process takes that long for them to get a disability retirement, but I have to pay their salaries, and now I have an unexpected absence, and I have to backfill it with overtime. So those costs are hard to predict. So what you see when we have a year that we have more injuries, more illnesses, the overtime costs go up. I'm expecting a couple of those firefighters that have been on the books for a while to be off the city side within the next 6 months or so, hopefully. So one of the conversations I've had with Mason is that the overtime that we're looking at is $700,000, I believe. And I had asked for $800,000. If that all works out in our favor, we're going to probably be in a really good place, far better than we've been in a while. If I have the opposite happen and I have a few more people get injured, that's the other wild card. The other part that's hard to plan with certainty is we go on the assumption we're going to hire paramedics. And there's a shortage. We have a hard time getting them, even though we fixed most of the problems that were making us not competitive. Now we're very competitive, but there still is a statewide shortage. So if we hire a paramedic, I don't have to send them to paramedic school. There's a significant savings for the city. If I hire an EMT, that person has to be sent to paramedic school at some point, and the cost for the city, when you factor in backfill, cost of tuition and everything, you're looking at $45,000. So the one thing we have fixed, and this was with the cooperation of the current administration, and Mason was involved in it also, is we've fixed the salary issues that were making us not competitive. Because what was happening before is we were hiring these people, I was sending them to paramedic school, spending all of that money, then we're sending them to the fire academy, they come certified, and a month later they're taking a job for a surrounding community that's paying more money. So we're not the highest paid, but we're now at a point that people are not looking at it as I have to leave, and that's made a big difference. We haven't had any real significant turnover in several years, which is the first time for quite a while, so that's been fixed. So I'm optimistic that what you'll see, it probably won't be this year though, so I don't want to get Mason's hopes up. I have 19 basic EMTs on the fire department. We don't want to operate with basic EMTs. When in 2016, that was the last year, 2017 was the last year that we were really successfully hiring paramedics. There was a statewide shortage and some other things were going on, but since that time, we've almost exclusively hired basic EMTs. When I got on the department 25 years ago, we were only hiring paramedics. So, and there were enough of them that it was, you could do it. One of the challenges with paramedics is that most paramedic programs are certificate programs, and there's very little funding available. There's no scholarships or anything for paramedic programs, so you don't see too many people. It's $15,000, $20,000 for paramedic school, and not everybody can afford that. So anyway, so that's the long answer to the overtime issue. Like I've talked to Mason, multiple times, and we're confident that we'll make that work, with the understanding that if something changes, I'm going to have a conversation with Mason, and I'll come back to the council to get the necessary funding for that. Anyway, so that was the issue for overtime.
Are there any questions there before we move on? Because that was one of the bigger items to talk about within the fire budget. Are we good there before we, okay.
Okay, well, that was easy. I need that little red button. That was easy. Okay, so a couple of other things. You'll see some small differences in what was requested and what was recommended. And Mason and I have our own spreadsheets that we utilize to come up with the numbers. We're really, really close to each other, but there were some times there were some small differences. So if you see something small, that's what that is. That's just simply my formulas and his are a small amount different. Nothing significant. let's see, the severance sick leave incentive, that was reduced by $10,000. That's based on historical data. July of each fiscal year, I have to provide a sick leave incentive payment to the members in the union. And it's difficult to project it because I pay that in July. So this July I'll be paying it, but I have to pay it with FY24 money. So I can't even say to the council now what that expense is going to be until July 1st. I have an idea. It can't go up. It can only go down. But historically, it varies between $40,000 and $50,000. So if it comes in higher than the $40,000, I'll have a conversation, with Mason about how I'm going to fund that. I may have to do an internal transfer and then ask back to the council at some point if I need to transfer the funds. The same thing with the vacation buyback. That's typically around $20,000 a year. That's being funded at zero, and the conversation was that when I know what that amount is, that I'll come and ask for the funding. So I don't.
So for clarity on those, so within all the departments, if there's, a vacation buyback or an earned time payment, that you guys see those requests come down. So it's kind of the same approach that you see in other departments. Historically, we've budgeted some within the department, but usually it's an internal transfer request for funding through the council. So taking the same approach across every department. So that's why that change happened.
And one of the things that I do, and we've had the conversation, that firefighters can retire as young as 55. So I have a list of firefighters that are eligible to retire, and what the buyout costs would be if they did retire in the fiscal year. So I've had those conversations with Mason. I don't anticipate those retirements this year. If I had retirements that I knew they had to retire because of age, then it would be a different conversation that we'd have to fund that up front. But, realistically, other than the 2 or 3 people that are out on injuries, I don't anticipate any retirements this year. There was a education and training account. There was a reduction of $55,000. So that account, that's one of the accounts that I started using when I became chief, because when I first became chief, all of my overtime came out of the same account. And when we were sending people to the fire academy, it got confusing to the council. It wasn't transparent to say what's this money being used for. So that account, the reason that number is so high is that's to backfill sending people to the fire academy. So when I send somebody to the Mass Fire Academy, they'll be unable to work the shifts for 10 weeks. So it's 42 hours for 10 weeks. With our staffing levels, we're pretty much at 100% of the time if somebody's out, we have to backfill. So that's a line item to kind of break that down with those costs. So there's some other expenses that we pay out of there, like a live fire training, driver operator training. That was reduced, which I don't anticipate that to be a problem. It was necessary to kind of help balance the budget. So the number I had recommended or requested was worst case scenario based on me sending 11 firefighters to the fire academy. I have 7 right now that we're trying to hire, and I have 6 that are just starting the fire academy. But even if I hire 7 for July 1st, the wait list to get in the academy is 6 months to a year. So I'd like to have a conversation with the council so that they know that if I don't spend it this year, it's not that it wasn't necessary, it's because I couldn't get them into the academy. And what that means is next year may be worse, The good news is the people we're looking at hiring, at least 4 of them are already firefighter 1 and 2 certified and paramedics. So that would be the first time for us in a long time that we're actually able to hire people that can actually come in, maybe 1 or 2 weeks of training on the job, get comfortable with the department, but they can actually go to work right away, as opposed to, paying them for a year that they really are not able to do the job yet.
Sorry, I raised my hand as the chair of my committee. Mason, for items like that, is there should we have a fund or something like that to set aside funds for individuals or people that are potentially going to the firefighter academy or the police academy and stuff like that? And if they're just waiting to go to the academy, and we need to pay for that, but maybe they don't go this year, but they go next year, but we want to make sure we set those funds aside in some sort of a stabilization account or some sort of, is there something we should do to set those funds aside so that they would roll over to the following year? Or
It's a kind of escrow you're proposing. Yeah. Really?
You're proposing sort of a multi-year fund. I don't necessarily know what the revenue source would be. Right. So, when we look at most of our multi-year funds, they're either capital project funds or revolving funds where there's, revenue sources that come in and are carried over year to year.
Or just an easier way to track that so that we would, because otherwise we'll look at it and it's jagged and it's tough to sort of see it look at it over time. Just something to think about.
It's an interesting question. I don't know if I don't know if that's the right mechanism for it, but I think it's an interesting question of how we could better track and, potentially kind of ensure those funds are set aside for these purposes. I think the goal of having it a separate line item in the budget is that, but the reality is, like the chief said, it might not come up this year. But if that's the case, it's also likely that he would transfer those funds to backfill for the fact that those positions are vacant or that they're not trained up to the level that they're needed. So he would need those funds elsewhere in regular overtime or somewhere else. So I think that's part of the benefit of having it within his budget is that in those years, he can still access those funds for other purposes. But then we just have to also know that, you could need those funds every year.
Actually, that's a good point, Mason. If you look at the overtime line from last fiscal year, it's approaching 1.2 million and change, which is pretty typical. It is what it is, but it wasn't anywhere near that amount at the beginning of the fiscal year. Most of those, the difference in funds, as you know, I didn't come to the council, I didn't ask for any additional funding all year. Didn't need any additional funding because we took some money from salaries, but some of it did come from that education and training account.
268,000.
Right, because we couldn't hire people. We didn't get them in a timely manner, so when we didn't get them, now I can't send them to the fire academy. And the way I calculate my overtime is I know contractually how much vacation people are entitled to. So on my payroll spreadsheets, I have that all factored in, and I do a worst case estimate based on if they all took vacation on the same day. That's the most expensive option for the city, for the department, because that would give me the most holes to backfill. So I do that in my spreadsheet, get an analysis of the cost of the vacancies for vacation, worst case scenario. Then I add on top of that, I look at the historical data for all of the other types of leave, whether it's sick leave, bereavement, union leave, other things, and do an average, including the wild card is always IOD, injuries on duty, and I do an average of that. And then that number, it is what it is. That's what I say that I need for overtime. And it comes from a combination of places. It comes from the general fund, and it also comes from the ambulance revolving account. So we take those two and combine them, and that's where I come up with those numbers.
That all makes sense, and it makes sense that it's not a good idea to set those funds aside, and it's better to keep them liquid and available.
I don't want to sell the idea short as not a good
Yeah,
idea.
yeah,
I just
no,
think,
no.
I don't know if that's the mechanism, but I think,
Right.
it's an interesting conversation, and if there's a better way to track it, I think that's something we should certainly entertain, right? I think we want to be as transparent as possible, and, make sure there's we have a reasonable approach year to year. So I don't think it's the wrong question. I don't know if that's the mechanism I would recommend.
Fair.
Okay, just a couple of other things that, if you look at the accounts for maintenance of vehicles, that's a big one for the department. So we've had, this year has been tremendously expensive for the repairs of apparatus. If you look at maintenance of vehicles is up to 66,000. Major vehicle repairs is 182,000. So I've had ladder trucks out of service for a year. I'm looking at $50,000-$60,000 bills. The problem for most of these trucks is they have to go to specialty shops. You know, a lot of the stuff is, you'll avoid the manufacturer's warranty if we don't have work done at certain facilities, so it's exceedingly expensive. And the other thing that some of you may or may not know, that we have no mechanics. When I became chief, we had 2 mechanics. We haven't had a mechanic for 10 years. So to be a mechanic for the fire apparatus, you need to have specific training, and most of you have toured the fire stations. You see I have no facility to do it, but I'm an advocate of city having a citywide fleet maintenance with qualified mechanics, because it's not just the money that I spend on having them repaired. The other expense, which is small in the big picture, but it's an unnecessary expense, is when I have a truck that needs to be repaired, I have to pay 2 people overtime to drive that someplace. So they have to go drive it someplace and then drive back. 4-hour minimum, you know, so not that it happens every day, but we're doing a lot of those things that are really not, I don't think they're an efficient use of taxpayer revenue. Certainly not something that can be fixed quickly. It's been discussed before, a citywide, you know, maintenance division, but I do believe that it would serve the city well. And if I had mechanics back at the station, there's some stuff we would do in-house. I don't know if we have enough work that they'd be qualified to do, that we still wouldn't be sending some things out. So I don't know that it would be cost-effective just for the fire department to have mechanics back, but I do think to have some place that we could bring the apparatus. So right now, even my small vehicles everything gets sent out. An expense with that. And the maintenance of buildings, that was one account that I believe I did ask for a small increase. Yeah, $10,000, which Mason was gracious enough to leave that one in place, so thank you, Mason. And that was basically a conversation with, the building's 120 years old, and I can't, you know, if I don't have the funding, I can't plan to fix things, so I can't say 100% what I'm gonna do with that funding, but having that funding will allow me to survey the buildings and say, all right, I can replace those 4 doors, get a quote, it's $11,000. So, I mean, you've been there, you know there's a lot to do. It looks like we're gonna be there for a while, so I think we need to make some effort to, you know, do what we can do, so. That's the long and short of it, of the overall budget. If there's any other questions, and I can certainly go over the revolving account, EMS revolving account, if you have any questions on that.
One quick question, Chief. Thank you, Chair Kobus. In this, I know it's not in the budget, but was there any talk about the idea you floated to us on the tours regarding the city setting aside money annually towards kind of offsetting replacement of trucks in preparation for the inevitable?
Yep, so, I mean, that was a short conversation with Mason, but his head was spinning from all the other things. It was actually something that a former city councilor had brought up. The fire apparatus has a longer life expectancy than most vehicles, so the life expectancy of my trucks a ladder truck is 25 years, and a fire engine is probably 20. So I had, and I know I explained to some of you folks, I had done a cost analysis. The city should be trying to buy a new fire engine every 3 years, and a ladder truck every 10 years, an ambulance every 1 to 2 years, and that would keep the fleet where it needs to be. And when I had developed costs associated with that 10 years ago, it was about $400,000 a year would be necessary from the city. It's probably $600,000 now, but that's where I think it would be a good use of accounts like you recommended, is accounts that you can have the money set aside, because that way when the departments need the vehicles, because right now there's conversation about a ladder truck that's $1.5 million or more with a 2 to 3 year period of time to build it. And, you know, I mean, there's a lot of work involved, and everybody's, you know, helpful when we need to do it, but there's a lot of people at City Hall that have to do a lot of things to get the funding so that we can actually sit down with the vendor, and, because all those trucks are, they're custom designed, so you sit down for months with the engineers to develop the trucks. So, yes, that would be something that maybe I can get Mason on board, and we can come back to the council at some point in the future.
Sounds good, thanks.
And
Deb doesn't like that idea.
I'd love to be buying stuff for cash, chief. I just don't know where you're gonna get the cash, right? That's the fundamental
I didn't say we
question.
were gonna, I don't know where it is, but
That's the, there you go.
he didn't ask me if I knew where the money
John
was.
Forby's.
Right? Like, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
If we could figure that out,
And am I correct in looking at this, I don't see anything for the, what was it, the NFPA response analysis? That's not included in this budget at
It's
all
not
for
as
the
a
fire.
line item, no. That'll be, I know it's,
With capital improvement
Yep.
or
Oh.
somewhere else
Yep.
that would be sent down and requested it if the administration decides to do that
yeah,
analysis.
that's an important thing for the city to have a good blueprint of, you know, where we're gonna be in the next 10 years.
Oh, boy.
Thank you, Chair Cobus. Quick question. So you mentioned being able to hire licensed firefighter paramedics. Is that lateral transfers as a testament to the bargaining agreement, or is that more maybe like volunteer firefighters who got certified and are now?
It's a bargaining agreement.
Okay.
There's two parts of it. Our department, we're a very unique fire department because we are a city, small city, but compared to the towns around us, they look at us as a big city. So, in the cities in Bristol County, like New Bedford, Fall River, Taunton, we're actually a far busier fire department than them, even though they have a higher population, because those departments don't run the EMS side of things. So we're busier. 10 years ago, we were the 5th busiest fire-based EMS system in the state. Right now, we're the 3rd busiest. Our call volume has doubled in 15 years, and that's only going to continue. It's one of the things that, if you look at the revolving account 2610, it's something that I've advocated for a while, and I think the city really needs to start to look at it. That, and I understand that we're not inventing funding, but the split is 40%, 60%. I have a lot of leeway with what, I won't say that in front of the city auditor. I have some leeway.
I'm waiting.
I have some leeway in how overtime funds can be used from that account because of the way we operate. We have paramedics on the fire engines. So I think a better option for the city going forward, we're going to need another ambulance in service at some point, 2 to 3 years. It's a necessity. It's not, and if we don't do it, we're going to stop falling behind on calls. We're already, the standard to get to calls within 6 minutes, it's an NFPA 1710 standard, is 90% of the calls within 6 minutes. We're down to 72%. When I became chief, we were at 95%. And the sole driving factor for that is call volume. And on top of that, now we're going out of state, we're going to Rhode Island Hospital a lot more than we used to. So when the trucks are out of service, we're not getting to the calls sometimes. So this data is given to the state every year. Insurance companies can get this data, and ISO, when they come and do a new evaluation, probably in a year or two, we'll see this data. And the concern with it is that when your ISO drops, which I don't believe it'll drop this time, but it will if this continues, is you get commercial insurance companies won't insure businesses. It's very frequent for businesses when they come into the city, and folks are trying to get these businesses to come in, is that one of the first things they do is they go to my fire prevention office and they want to see our ISO rating. Because if it's not high enough, they're going to look for a community that has a higher ISO rating, because their fire insurance is better. And some businesses, you can't get the insurance if you don't have a good enough ISO rating. So we're a Class 2 fire department. We're close to becoming a Class 1. Class 2 is good, Class 2 works, but we could also go down to a Class 3 if that response trend continues. So one of the things I believe that the city really does need to look at, and it's going to take 10 years to get it done, and I will be retired by then, but I think it's in the best interest of the taxpayers, is that the money that's generated from EMS, there should be a plan to mandate somehow with the council that those funds, the community and this body should decide what those funds are used for. I don't, it sounds funny to say, I don't think it should be my discretion. I really do believe that it should be, the language should be cleaned up, and I think that the city should figure out a way to get the funding so that 100% of it is directly to keeping ambulances in service. Because if we didn't have ambulances, if we didn't run the ambulance service, we still need the same number of firefighters. That's a conversation I've had with many councils in the past when they talk about private ambulances, and I could spend an hour talking about private ambulance is not a good idea for community because it destroys your firefighting force. Plus, any private company is gonna come in and they're gonna bill the exact same amount that we do, and they will never give a resident a waiver. They'll never waive a bill. It's never a good thing. You won't find one city that has a private ambulance service that isn't trying to get the municipality to manage it. So I believe that what we're doing works very well. We have a very good service. We generate a lot of revenue. We generate $4 million a year, and that'll only continue to go up. I know we spend a lot too. I know what Mason's thinking. I know we do. But it's a service that, it's the one service that everybody gets, everybody gets regardless of their income, their background, their religious beliefs. It's kind of a pure service, and I would hate to see that service not be as good as it can be. We're at risk now because it's still as good as it has been, but it's at risk of not being, and that's something that I don't think anybody in the room wants to see happen. So I think that would be something to figure out a plan to lock up those funds.
Excellent, thank you, Chief. Any other questions or comments?
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Chief, just as a follow-up, just for clarification, salaries for people who presently staff the ambulances are in the general fund?
Yes.
Okay. So the 60% of the ambulance receipts that go to the general fund help support the budget that does help support those salaries,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Right, no, it does.
Nope, I
Nope,
gotta say it,
absolutely.
right?
Nope.
And then the other thing, just for additional clarification, is if I heard you correctly, you're saying, really, we need 3 ambulances in service in the city in order to get the run rate back to the percentage,
We need
the
3,
timing.
yeah, we need 3 full-time ambulances. I have 1 full-time and 2 that are staffed, cross-staffed with other vehicles, so we would need 3 full-time rescues.
Do you have the staff to staff 3, or no? And how many additional staff people would that require?
We require 8.
Additional 8 personnel? Okay, thank you.
Yeah. No, it's $1 million, so it is.
I just, I mean,
The other part that you mentioned, which is, it's true, but it's a little bit, it can be misleading. The firefighters that are assigned to the rescues, while they do get to count as firefighters, that's not really true for us anymore, because ISO, when they come in and they look at your staffing level, the standard that they look at is how likely are you to get 15 firefighters of any rank at a fire within 6 minutes. That's what NFPA 1710 says. Can you get 15 people at a fire in less than 6 minutes, 90% of the time? They allow us to count the firefighters that are assigned on the ambulances, but they don't allow us to count them anymore, because when they come in, they look at the run data, and once the ambulance, say rescue 1, is that busy, once they say, well, 45 to 50% of the time they're not available, you don't get to count them towards the staffing, so that we lose the credit for our firefighter staffing. So that's why I say, like, it works well if the rescues are not busy, but they're not quite, they're not able to count as staffing. So I don't know if that answers your question, but, so.
I think it helps paint a clearer picture, but I also need to at least point out to people who are new that, yes, there's the revenue for the ambulance that goes to the general fund, but that revenue does help to support the overall general fund, of which the salaries for those same people are there. So.
Right, but what it actually allows the city to do is to staff fire engines with, with money generated by an ambulance. So, just my opinion. So.
Perfect. All right, good? Chief.
Right,
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Chief.
Up is the rec department. Christie?
Lost my cheat sheet.
Creation, 117. Welcome, and hopefully, now that you've seen a few of these, this should be very relaxing, and hopefully it's not intimidating.
I'm relaxed.
Whatsoever. Oh, all right, perfect. Well, then, welcome. Well, we'll change that. Welcome, and my intent is for this to just be an opportunity for each of the departments to come before us and talk a little bit about what their plan is and what they've accomplished last year and what they intend to do over the next year and what the budget looks like. So take it away.
Yeah, so thank you, everyone. It's nice to meet counselors I haven't met before. Very nice to meet you. Full disclosure, I did this week 3 is when I put together this budget. So it really was an exercise for me in getting to know the process and a deep dive into doing a budget for a municipality. So it's pretty level funded, and Mason was great walking me through everything. And one thing I do have to say is my predecessor and the assistant director kept wonderful records. So being able to deep dive into historical data with the expenses and revenues, it really lined up. I mean, if you look at the historical data, a lot of this was copy and paste for me. I mean, because it was week 3 that I put it together, I wasn't trying to shake a ship too much. The only real increase was in the maintenance of the rec areas, and that's part of a 5-year phased plan to get that category line up to $50,000 to be able to maintain fields rather than have to redo them. There's been so much work done on the field over the last 15 to 20 years that we don't want to just let it waste away. We want to make sure that we're maintaining it properly. So I am moving forward with year 3 of that phased 5-year plan to get that category up to 50,000. And then the only other increases outside of salary line is just like everybody else, utilities. Happy to answer any questions. It's been, all I can say it's, doing it week 3, doing the budget week 3 was actually, at first, I was like, wait a minute, what I'm coming into? But it was actually the best thing that could have happened for me because I'm learning it, I'm living it every single day from day 1. Not as exciting as fire, but I'm much more playful. We can talk about rec if you'd like to.
Councilor LaVoy.
Thank you. Pleasure meeting you. Welcome to Attleboro. I just wanted to comment. I just love the objective of the increased programs at the Bartek Center. I think that they're definitely very beneficial, and especially the after-school program. So I just wanted to comment on
Lots
that.
of ideas
Love
already
the
in
idea.
motion.
Thank you.
Lots of collaborations, I've already applied for a couple of grants. So getting creative outside of asking for more money,
We'll have to hear that.
bringing in some money, finding it. I love finding money.
I'll ask a question.
Councilor Walker.
So, can you talk about your main building and the issues there? Because that's where I would assume that there might be,
We have issues?
I don't know. You can talk about them.
Yeah, right.
HVAC or something.
Yeah, right now, so I mean, we've got 4 big issues at the Bartek Center. The roof, the HVAC system, the gymnasium floor, and the ADA compliance. Those are the 4 main issues. We're starting with the roof. Why do anything else if you're not doing the roof first? So we are collecting quotes right now because the roof, I think the HVAC was the high ticket, but we've had new developments with the roof. The seams are really giving way. It's billowing in the wind. A new roof is north of $1 million, so we are looking at repair work. So we're collecting quotes right now on the back half and the front half because there's masonry work that needs to be done on the front half. And then we also have a tentative plan in place to go after some CDBG for retrofitted elevator to the building so that we can start to program the 3rd floor, because right now I can't advertise programs on the 3rd floor. It's not accessible. So we are looking at that. I have someone coming in to do a quote on the gymnasium floor. It's been As a basketball background, I can appreciate an original floor, but you cannot finish it down any further. So we're going to start collecting quotes on that as well. And then as far as the ADA stuff, as you all know, we already have that report. But it was just handed to us. Here's all your problems. So I'm going to spend this year really organizing it and prioritizing what we want to do, and then start to try to identify some funding to start working on that type of stuff. But yes, the building is obviously going to be my focus over the next, 5 years or so, to be able to properly program it. I mean, the fun stuff that I'm doing in the building, we're going to be doing some murals, we're going to be putting some colors on the walls, and starting to make it look more like a recreation center than an armory. From the inside. Outside, very historical.
You're going to get more use from seniors.
Yes, I've been working with the COA as well as the Attleboro Library. We started our first program meetings. We're going to be meeting on a monthly basis as the departments that are doing the community-facing programming and identify the gaps in what it is we're offering currently and where can recreation come alongside what's already being offered. And the low-hanging fruit with the Council on Aging was bringing over their fitness classes. We started hosting them a couple of weeks ago. We've already seen an uptick in participation because there's more parking.
Councilor Dolan.
So just one comment, welcome, I know we've met earlier, but the ADA compliance, because for the past, I don't know how many years, I've always put that on my list of what's important in the capital improvements, and as of this year, it went from 600,000 to 750,000. So we talk about it a lot, and it's always one of my top priorities. Unfortunately, it hasn't been funded yet, but I noticed that it went up $150,000 in the capital improvements book, and which is a shame, but we care about that, we do, but we just apparently don't have the funding at this time. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So just a quick question on the maintenance of the facilities. So you mentioned we're in year 3 of sort of a 5-year plan. What are some of those things that those additional monies are going towards in terms of long-term maintenance of some of the fields? Just curious.
Long-term meaning like landscaping or just the upkeep, basically?
Well, so long-term in terms of increasing that account to be able to better maintain as opposed to
more
sort of
pickleball
losing.
courts we have, the more crack seals that we've got to do, the more resealing, coating. I don't know, I haven't learned all of the terms. During lunch periods, I'm reading about lifelines of tennis courts. So that's where those monies are going to go, is to maintain those types of things. Windscreens, like all of that stuff that you just have to do on an annual basis. And it's increasing because we keep adding more pickleball courts.
To follow up,
Councilor Wyatt.
so is that connected, the maintenance to recreation, originally 15,000, revised budget 10.5? Are we talking about the same thing here?
No, we're talking about the maintenance recreation areas, the 524002.
That is exactly what I was referring to. Yes, sorry. Did you feel that was sufficient?
5,000 a year? Go up?
Original appropriation 15, revised budget 10,500.
That's the
That's
heating
the
account.
revolving.
I'm sorry, couldn't hear you.
He's in the revolving fund. You're in the revolving
I'm
fund.
in the
sorry.
revolving
Yep.
fund? I
So-
apologize
no,
then.
So the current year budget on the appropriation side, the same account number, just a different org, so was in fiscal '24, the revised budget is 24,310. The requested and recommended for '25 is 30,900. The revolving fund is a fund that is available to the Recreation Department, and that's where they had, Dennis had put the 15,000, and then that was shifted within the grouping. So they actually have 2 sources for this, for the recreation of maintenance.
I didn't
Maintenance
know that.
recreation areas.
Okay.
The revolving fund is the other spot that
But I was mostly concerned whether you felt it was adequate for your needs.
Yes.
Okay.
Based on the historical data and as I'm even getting ready for year end, I do think it's sufficient.
And just to expand on that a little bit, so the recreation brings in revenues through various programs, and that's what goes into the revolving account. And so those funds also support, the maintenance of the fields, the maintenance of the facilities, the offering of those programs, the staffing for those programs, and a lot of that funnels through the revolving account, as well as the pools. The pools is the biggest factor going through that account. So just to kind of clarify, so there's additional funds, that are made available through there for maintenance.
Thank you.
And I see a note here, the goal is to open all 3 pools again this summer.
All 3 will be open, and yes, all 3 are going to be open on time.
Probably maybe a good opportunity to talk about the generous donation too. That was offered to the city, and
Yeah, I don't know where that sits here.
it just went down on Tuesday. So I don't know if everybody saw it, but it might be a good opportunity to talk about that, because
Happy to talk about it, because it's been what I've been losing sleep over since I started. The donation, the generous donation from RJ Forbes, we ran into a snag with prevailing wage, putting them over the dollar amount that they wanted to donate. So Deb and her staff were helping me with the folks at the state to try to be creative with how might we, and we might not, basically, when it comes to getting around that or working within that. So one of the creative ways that we came up with doing it is they're going to do the services, donate the services that we in-house cannot do. And then they're going to donate the materials for the rest of the 3rd phase of the project, and our in-house labor team will do the work. And that will still get us the epoxy, and which will extend the lifeline of the pool. So I'm really happy with how kind and generous this company was with me being new and working quickly to learn. And again, there was that little snag of they didn't think that they were going to have to pay prevailing wage because it was a donation to the city. So I'm happy, thank you for accepting the communication, and hopefully we get the green light to start on time so that the Briggs pool opens on time. That was my hesitation with saying, yes, all 3 pools are going to open on time.
Outstanding. Vice President Dolan.
So first of all, what a great donation.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Completely amazing. And just to let you know, we're fast tracking it.
I appreciate
I'll
that.
have that. I'm having a committee meeting. and
I've been
we'll
fast tracking my creativity to get it done.
We'll be voting it out this coming week, next week.
Perfect. Anything else? Outstanding.
Thank you.
Thank you
so
very
much.
much.
Thank you.
You guys have a wonderful evening.
Welcome again.
Leo? Brought a lot.
My support system. I appreciated him coming.
Thank you.
He's dig.
Next up is wastewater. Tom, welcome.
Good evening.
Now we're shifting all the way to the back of the budget book.
Yeah.
Your book,
Nope.
that web page, let me know.
All the way in the back, you go to the grouping way back, yeah?
Salary sheets in here.
Oh, I'm close.
Yep, right there. Actually, one,
You gotta find
go
the.
back towards the left.
All right, so that's it. No, salary details, so it's before, right before salary details.
I'll give you that because I was a little chilly, and I'm like, it must be freezing for some people in there.
It's cold.
I think I got it. Oh, it's farther?
Yeah, no, I think this,
All set?
Oh, yes.
Okay. For the most part, other than the cost of everything increase, we tried to, keep the budget as close to last year as possible. There are a few line items that we had to increase this year. Probably one of the bigger ones is 548042, which is supply equipment maintenance. Right now, we're about $190,000 in the hole where we feel good on equipment maintenance pots. We've been living off the stock that we got when we rebuilt the plant 20 years ago, and it's dwindling, and it's getting harder and harder to find the replacement pots, and the equipment's getting older and older. Once you turn it on, it doesn't shut off again unless you have to fix it. So that was probably one of our bigger increases this year in the budget, was that line. Another increase was maintenance of sewer lines. The main process drains in the plant, they've never been professionally descaled. There's a lot of buildup. These are 18-inch lines. Some of them are restricted down to maybe 6 inches. So we have to have them mechanically cleaned. We don't have the means to clean them. So, you know, that's a $35,000 outlay. And that's probably going to be every 5 years or so, 5 to 7 years. It won't be as bad the next time around. Professional services, that went up a bit this year. We have to do a update on our spill prevention, control, and countermeasure plan every 5 years. This happened to be the 5th year, so there was an additional $7,500 needed to have that plan revised, which is a requirement by EPA. Overtime cost, my overtime is ridiculous. We are got an aging staff. We are all aging now. Almost in my entire staff is at the point of they're eligible for retirement. Qualified licensed operators with a sufficient grade to be left in charge at the plant and left alone at the plant. I have 3 right now. I run 5 shifts. I only have 3 operators that actually meet the license requirement. I've got people that are working 12-hour shifts, 5, 6, 7 days a week, just because we don't have the coverage. My assistant is actually covering operations during the day because we don't have enough staff to even put someone on to be in charge during the day. We're paying a lot of overtime, and until we can get people that can actually pass the tests and get the licenses, it's going to continue. We're onboarding new OITs, and we're training them. We're sending them to school.
What's OIT?
Operator in training.
Okay.
But, you know, it's a long road, and we have people that have tested a dozen times, and they're still not passing the tests. And it's an industry-wide. This is not just us. Everybody has this problem in the industry, and everybody's poaching from other plants and enticing people away because they need the operators too. So that's driven the overtime through the roof this year. We're hoping it's going to get better as time goes on and people get trained and pass the test and get the licensing so they can actually be left alone in the plant. But until that happens, we're going to have some, high overtime costs and a lot of burnt out employees.
Probably a good opportunity though also to mention we've had some recent success with bringing on people at the OIT level, training them up, to the various operator levels. So HR and Tom have kind of put together this plan to bring in OITs, train them up, get them to the grade 6 licenses, and that's actually reflected in this budget with the reserve for promotion. So there's individuals that have been brought in, at that OIT level, and there's funds set aside for, as they hit those licenses, they'll essentially be moved up a grade. They moved up to those head operator positions once they reach those qualifications, and people have been moving through those relatively quick and recent. So we've had some really successful new hires. So I think that's kind of a light at the end of the tunnel. In the
and we have several people that they're just at that last hurdle. They're at that last license test that they're having trouble, but they're hitting it hard and they're trying. So we hope to by the end of summer be fully staffed again with licensed operators that are qualified to actually be in charge of the plant, responsible charge. So we do have an increase this year because we are going to, we anticipate more overtime. A pretty good increase in replacement computers, 558016 this year. Basically, our computers, I was told by MIS, our computers need to be replaced next year. They're now too old, so we're going to have to replace all the PCs in the facility. And there's a line to fund additional funding for the I&I Phase 3 engineering portion. The city has probably one of the biggest challenges we face lately is this rain. We've seen flows increase by as much as 100%. We've seen, average flows in February of approximately 100 million gallons. We were seeing over 200 million gallons coming through the facility. And most of this flow is because of inflow and infiltration. The system's well over 100 years old. And as you get closer to the center of town, it gets worse because of the old buildings, the old cross connects with storm drains and roof leaders into the sewer system that, now never would have been there in modern times, but back then it was just the way they did things. No one ever realized what was going to happen 100 years later. And now we're working hard to identify these and to, do any remediation that needs to be done, take care of the problems. On the city side, we have the ability to take care of our problems. We own the lines. It gets harder when you get into private residence and businesses. That's going to be a hard sell. But it's going to be probably 30 years. You're probably looking at a 30-year plan. We broke the city up into 21 areas a couple of years ago. We did basin studies. We measured the inflow. And we're just starting now on Area 13, which was the worst area in the city. And we're planning to start the second phase of Area 16, hopefully within the next year or so. And while this is going on, we need to go into construction too. We have to basically be studying one area and doing construction on the area that we just finished studying. We are looking for some relief from the state, but there's not a lot of money being given to wastewater. So, but that's something that it's in the future is going to really impact our budget. That and the fact that the facility is now 44 years old. It's never been turned off since it was turned on. It can't be. And we did our last major upgrade 20 years ago. The facility is in desperate need of another major upgrade. What's holding us back is EPA has not released our new NIPDES permit, a new discharge permit. I filed the application in 2013. It's been 11 years. They're still sitting on it with a bunch of other permits. So we don't know what to design for or what we're going to get. We can only make guesses. And you really can't design for that. But once they drop that permit, they expect you to be making that permit the day it drops. So we need to be prepared for that because we're going to have a big price tag coming down the road in the near future.
And you said you submitted that 11 years ago?
2013, February of 2013. That's not unheard of. I mean, I've had other permits I've submitted that's taken a decade to get back to you. Yeah. They move at their own pace. But once they do drop it on you, they expect you to be ready to handle it. So, and that plant's doing things. That plant was designed in the 70s. It was never designed to what they want us to do now. But, we're trying to make it do it. But we've pushed it as much as we can. So it's going to be a huge upgrade next time.
Do we hear any feedback from them? Like when we check with them, do they say where it is in the process?
It's crickets. I mean, I'm in contact with DEP and EPA, who are basically the section chiefs that handle the oversight of the treatment facilities. They're not in the permitting division, and they don't know what's going on. And they're right in there with EPA. They don't know what's going on up in Boston at that level.
Okay.
Yes.
We talked about this earlier today.
Yes.
My understanding is, Superintendent, that we are treating inflow and infiltration that is using up space that really should be available for wastewater. Is that right?
It's overwhelming the facility. It's taking up capacity in the infrastructure. Everything that goes to the facility has to be treated, and we don't treat it once. Some things are stuck in the plant. We'll recirculate them 400 times in circulation to treat them down to the levels to make them able to be discharged. So when you've taken your flow and you've doubled it, that's a large expense. It increases the amount of chemical needed because you're diluting the chemical, and it also increases the amount of electricity. Is ridiculous because you have to pump and move this water multiple times.
So it's extremely cost-effective, then, I would conclude.
Get rid of the I&I?
To get rid of it, to reduce it. I mean, you can't get rid of it overnight.
You can't get rid of it altogether. It is very cost-effective. It will take take the burden off the treatment plant, off the collection systems. It will eliminate the chances of having any sanitary sewer overflows or backups in the residents' homes when the lines are surcharged. It's expensive. It's not cheap to do. It is expensive, but in the end, you end up with a system that does what it was designed to do, to be a sanitary system, and only takes sanitary waste. And it will reduce the overall cost of operating the facility because it's going to reduce the amount of wastewater you have to treat and you have to move. And it's very expensive to move it. You have to move it with large pumps.
But what you said to me is, this is a 30-year project.
Yeah, oh yeah, I can't, unless somebody gave us a blank check tomorrow.
Yeah.
I mean, 30 years is not out of, it took us 100 years to get here. 30 years is not out of the question because you can't fix this all at once unless you have a magic wand to make money, because you're just not gonna be able to afford to do this. This is not gonna be cheap. You got approximately 150 miles of sewer main under the street. This doesn't even include all the private laterals to all the residents and the businesses that need to be looked into. And they all need to be sealed. And, you have a lot of roof leaders, storm drains, sump pumps, things that shouldn't be in the system that over the years have gotten into the system and connected to the system. And that's what really hurts us right now, is all the main inflow sources like that, because that's an instantaneous load on the plant. Groundwater seeping in, that takes time, it hurts, but it's that initial first couple of hours of the storm where the plant just gets wiped out because all that flow comes at once in one big shot, and we see it instantly.
Thank you. I apologize for simply speaking up and not being recognized first.
And just to follow up on that too, so to give an idea and why Tom's saying 30 years, the first sub-area he mentioned was sub-area 13. I believe the estimate in 2022, this is the end, like November, December of 2022, for cost was over $4 million.
1.8 to 4.6, depending on what the level 2 study we're doing there right now identifies. That's the range.
That's one sub area. So that's why, and also the construction it's a process, right? So, I mean, there's not capacity to deal with all those sub areas in the immediate. I think the goal, and what we tried to build into the model, is to incrementally increase the I&I reduction plan budget annually. So hoping to bring on an additional, $250,000 a year over the next few years to try to get to a point where, when we talk to the engineering consultants, get to a point where we're funding I&I, between $1 to $2 million a year to try to actually really start to put a dent in this. Because otherwise we're going to be, we're going to have to go out for large authorizations, loan authorizations for these projects pretty regularly over the next, 20 years.
It is a problem. There is historical cases where DEP will come down and they will give you a building moratorium if you don't control your I&I, and they'll say no more building until you reduce your I&I. And it's happened in communities to the north of us.
Thank you.
Councilor Dolan.
Thank you. Have you, I know that we've been going through a lot of departments. Have you looked at your fee schedule and increasing the fee schedule?
Yes, we have looked at
Have
it.
something for us to look at?
Not at this time, but we have started looking at the fee schedule.
Okay. And I just want to add, I know that I'm Public Works, but, and I know Courtney's here, unlike recreation, DPW, parks, you can't see what these people do. You don't see the beautiful fields and the sidewalks, but, I have to say, you guys are the unsung heroes. You do the most important work in this city, both of you, and I can't thank you enough, because people don't see what you do and how hard you work and how smart all of you and your staff are. So I'm a huge fan of you guys, and I can't thank you enough for all the hard work that you guys put in every day, you and water and wastewater. So my appreciation tremendously.
Thank you.
Join the counselor in that.
I just want to point out one thing as the council looks at the lines, if they look at them again later. The workers' comp indemnity and the workers' comp med has been separated out. They're one of the 3 unique departments. The only other departments that have that are water, wastewater, and the HR department. So that $75,000 that you see is the recommended amount. That's because we, under the new HR director, we've split indemnity and medical into two different accounts. So it looks like, oh, there's a new line where they have $75,000. It's really not. If you look at the line immediately above it, and you look over to the left, you can see the revised budget was needed at $180,024. So, 23. We're at 101 and 55 on the revised. Mason and I addressed that just before the budget came down to split that all out correctly. That's why you don't see it in Tom's requested, a similar $55,000 moving across.
And also to expand on that, this is consistent with the change we talked about previously, where any of these, permanent workers' composite or people that are permanently out on comp are being funded here rather than transferring down from the salary line. So the funds in 24 were actually transferred from salary. And so the difference here is, the positions that we know are not going to be backfilled are funded in this line. There's if there's individuals out on comp and that job is still being held for them, they're funded in the salary line. But this it actually is an increase because the purpose is that we won't have those long-standing vacancies and they can actually hire for those positions. So this is a change from prior, so it's obviously an net increase to the budget, so you should be aware of that. But, the result of not doing it is, significant overtime costs, and ultimately, part of the staffing issues we've faced of, when people are out. So.
Standing. Anything else?
Then I talked about the other night, but there is a new line, the reserve for capital line, that is funded at $100,000. It's, the approach is to balance it with retained, but that's for the fire alarm panels that need to be upgraded in the facility. So that is a new line. You should expect to see funding in that line going forward in future years for smaller capital items that we wouldn't want to go out to borrow for, but we need to essentially put into the budget. That's subject to a further vote by the council. The intention is the fire alarm panels.
Perfect. All right, and I apologize that we were running a little bit late.
No, that's fine. We're all set.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Tom.
Thank you.
Finally, Courtney, welcome. And I apologize as well for running a little bit late.
Much earlier than last year.
All right.
Courtney said to me earlier, she's like, I'm always the last one. They always put me last.
It's a W.
Welcome and take it away.
Okay. I kind of start with this every year. I say the same thing every year. We do our best in water to keep as low-cost spending as we possibly can. I prepare the budget every year with the ratepayer in mind. It's been a tough year. It's been a tough couple years with PFAS. We ended up with a unfunded mandate from Mass DEP back in '21, and then we had another one drop just a few weeks ago from EPA, all related to PFAS. So from there, I'll actually get into the reasons for some of the increases that you'll see with as low as I did try to keep things. The big ones that you'll actually see is there's two brand new accounts. One of them is to be able to purchase water to exercise an alarm test, the emergency interconnection with Pawtucket. We expect that online this summer, potentially early August. Again, it's an emergency connection. It's for loss of plant, drought, loss of tank site, that sort of thing. But we do have to exercise this and actually use it for a week or two a year to actually make sure that it's operational when we need it. So there is a new line item for purchase of the water. There's another new line item that is related to the temporary treatment plant at Wading River, and that is also expected late summer to early fall to be online and operational and give us some relief at the West Street plant. However, there is a.
Can I just interrupt you? I'm sorry. Where's the line for the Pawtucket? What number is that?
Oh, it's down at the bottom.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were looking at your thing. I'm just curious at what the,
Bear with me.
no, that's all right. I just wanted to see the number.
It's here. A 5/8 account, I know it is.
Pawtucket Water is on page 22.
Thank you. It's 5690, 569405.
35.
35,000.
Thank you.
Yep, and what that $35,000 will do is give us basically 1 week of purchase at 1 million gallons a day. And the plan is to use that water for flushing so that we're not just wasting it to ground. We'll use it to flush South Attleboro potentially in the fall. The other new account, and I'm sorry about the numbers, 584079. And that is the one that is related to the temporary treatment plant at Wading River. Again, hopefully up online by early fall. That $125,000 is related to the actual temporary treatment process at that plant. It's a bentonite clay resin. Pilot studying at that plant said the resin should last 18 months. Again, that's pilot scale. That's very small scale compared to what we're actually going to be running through this resin. So we have to prepare to plan to replace it. So that is in the budget. And even when we get to the permanent plant eventually, there will be a similar line item related because there's going to be a similar treatment process at the permanent plant. So those are the new ones. I'm sure everybody's probably heard this from every other department. The salaries, the overtime and healthcare accounts increased. And there was raises due to contract, and the healthcare accounts, the average cost of the increase to my department over the bulk of the healthcare accounts was about 7% on average. So for 31 employees, it adds up. Heating and electrical are related. There's a small increase there. Those are both related to heat and electrical for both the temporary treatment plant at Wading River, again, that extra treatment train, and the electrical for the Pawtucket interconnection. Pawtucket shouldn't use a whole lot of power when it's just sitting there ready to go, but again, we have to operate it 1 week a year, and we have to be able to heat it and keep the alarms and things like that up and running. We have 2 accounts, maintenance of wells and maintenance of contracts. Maintenance of wells I didn't fund last year, and I honestly don't believe I funded it the year before. And that is for basically a well cleaning at Wading River. We have the 2 filter beds, each with a submersible well pump. That all needs to be pulled up and the well purged and the pump looked at once a year when the plant's running. It hasn't been funded because the plant's been down. So with it coming back up, we plan to do that work in July. Maintenance contracts, you'll see an increase there because again, we have the filter beds there. We have to maintain them. With the plant down, we're able to cut that the last year and not scrape the beds because there was no water filtering through it. So that's back in that line. Professional services, there's an increase there. Some of this is related to the police detail rate. It went up about $9, went from $55 to $64 per hour. We use a lot of police details. We use them for any repair we do out in the field, so that tends to add up. We have our clear well inspection and cleaning at the plant. This is where the water actually leaves the West Street plant. It's due for inspection and cleaning this year. We typically do the standpipes out in the system. We do 1 a year, or we'll do the contact tanks at the plant. The clear well tends to be a little bit more costly. It involves either cammering or divers directly going into the tank and working around pumps and baffles and having the plant down, where most of our other tanks are kind of wide open and accessible. So this one has a bigger price tag. Engineering went up this year. Engineering kind of fluctuates, and the main thing that comes from this account is dam inspections. These are mandated by DCR. Our dams are on a cycle that is anywhere from 6 months up to 10 years. The bulk of our 10-year dam inspections are due this year. So the last few years, what you've been seeing is just the every 2 or the 6-month follow-up inspections, and this is going to hit the, we have one that's 5 years, and the remainder are 10. Lab services is going up. Some of that is related to PFAS sampling. We ended up, again, with this new EPA mandate in addition to what we're dealing with at DEP. So there is likely to be additional PFAS sampling for both plants, and for Pawtucket, when it comes online, we'll have to sample that as well. In addition, we have the UCMR 5. UCMR 5 is also an EPA mandate. We deal with it every 5 years. EPA basically looks at contaminants that could be out in the environment that may make it into drinking water, and they decide what they want to look at potentially to regulate in coming years. And this is how we originally ended up with the PFAS that we're regulated for now. The UCMR that we're currently sampling for and will be sampling into FY25 is for PFAS 29. So there may still be more coming. Trench repair is a very large increase from last year. What this account is used for, it's labor for repaving of trenches after water main breaks and service repairs. It also covers adjustment of the water gates when DPW does paving projects. We take on adjustment of the water gates as a cost under our budget. To give you some idea on the increases there, the last bid for raising these water gates was $85 per piece. The most recent bid that we're working under went up to $300. Trench paving was about triple as well, between FY23 and now. Supplies water, and it shows up as supplies water and wastewater, which is supplies for the distribution crew, pipes, valves, anything that they use for repairs and regular maintenance out there. And supplies lab, we're continuing to see costs increase for both of those for supplies. I'll end by saying what we've actually attempted to do between the water department and the financial team, who has been such wonderful help in all this. I mean, there's a couple ways we've looked at, either cutting or alleviating costs. The first one that came up is earlier this month or later in April, council voted to approve funding for either smaller capital or one-time expenditures that would have been in the budget, in the tune of just over $100,000 was basically moved from the budget into that transfer. So that's very helpful. We've applied for and were approved for the SRF funding that I was down at council for a couple weeks ago. That again is at least lower interest than we can normally get, and potentially zero on a $35 million loan. So that's, again, as the years go ahead, that will save the ratepayer hugely. We have been working with the city solicitor and an outside firm to search for settlement money to help with the costs of PFAS mitigation going forward, as well as what we've already spent, and Deb's office has been amazing with that, thank you. And the last thing, and I know Councilor Dolan has already asked this, and I've seen you ask this a few times over the last couple weeks, I am looking at fee revisions. With basically just about at a final draft, and I don't know when the plan to send it down is, but it's very, very soon. And the bulk of the fees that we charge at the water department are proposed to be going up.
Counselor Dolan?
Thanks. The new unfunded mandate, the EPA one that you were talking about, is that the new parts per million for the PFAS? Is that the one, the newest one you were talking about?
It's the newest one. It fell in mid-April. What we deal with Mass DEP is those 6 that I've been talking about the last few years, the 6 PFAS chemicals, with a total limit of a quarterly average for those 6 added together at 20 parts per trillion. That's where we were having the problems at Wading River. EPA took a separate 6 PFAS compounds. 5 of them overlap. They got rid of one of them that DEP looks at, and they added a new chemical to the group. 4 of them, EPA, the regulation is they add them together it's 4 separate ratios, and they add them together, and basically they have to fall as less than 1. I can tell you which compounds if you're really that interested.
No, that's right. I know we talked about it.
Those we're okay with. And then they took PFOS and PFOA, which have been banned, I want to say, since the 70s in the U.S., but they still import products with these compounds on them. Those are limited at a rolling annual average at each plant of 4 parts per trillion, singly. So if we see zeros in those other 4 that are averaged together, it doesn't matter, it doesn't average down anymore. The expectation is we're going to have to meet this in a couple of years at both plants. Wading River will be fine. The expectation is also that DEP's regulation isn't going away either, so we will have to meet both, which is unusual. Usually we're mandated just under DEP because they're typically more strict.
Please.
One last question. The resin, and again, I know we talked about the resin a little bit on the tour. Is the resin, is that what does the main job of removing the PFAS? So when you're predicting that, what that's going to cost, like, can you predict it? Because I assume it would fluctuate in the amount of resin that it uses to remove the PFAS, depending on how much PFAS it's removing?
Correct. It's going to depend on how much PFAS it's being removed. It's also going to depend on, well, the temporary plant we're limited to 1 million gallons a day. But it's also going to depend, again, this is a temporary plant for a couple of years. So the way the setup is going to be, there's going to be basically a pre-filter that will remove as much solids and particles as we can. And the point of that pre-filter is to make the PFAS resin last as long as possible. Again, we did piloting. We did 3 full rounds of piloting in preparation for the permanent plant. So we know this will work. And the estimate for the piloting was the resin should last 18 months. But again, it's smaller scale and it's also a snapshot. It's 2 to 3 weeks at a time during the piloting at specific times of year that is called for from the state. So we didn't see a full year in change in seasons. So best estimate is 18 months, but it could be a lot sooner.
Please. No,
So,
good questions.
Actually, 2 more things.
Sure.
Do you expect a settlement from the PFAS lawsuit, class action lawsuit?
We do.
Okay. And then, I know you were in the audience, but again, I can't show my appreciation enough for you and Tom and your crews, because, you know, the sun doesn't shine on you guys and nobody sees what you do, but you do such important work. It's our water. So, thank you for everything that you all do. That's it. I'm done. Thank you. I give kudos where they're due.
Yep.
I apologize if you've already voted it. I don't know if you voted Tuesday night, but the special purpose stabilization for
Yeah, we did.
PFAS settlement,
Yeah.
that is ideally where the funds for settlement will go, to restrict them. The council would be the folks that would have to vote those uses again out, once that money goes in there. There's two different types of settlement, just like an overall settlement, and there's a special funds settlement, where Courtney did the initial legwork, and my staff is going through and we're looking at it to make sure that we're capturing and reporting every possible penny we can to be in the best possible position to recapture as much money as we possibly can. All that being said, the one thing that Courtney didn't speak to, but Laura spoke to it a bit the other night, Mason, I'm sure, spoke to it again recently. If you'll look, there's about $1 million of new debt, right? It's the biggest increase, right, to this budget. It's new debt service, largely driven by PFAS requirements. There's some other pieces to it, but that's the real big budget buster, right? Everything else is big, but that's what it is. It's almost $1 million in new debt.
Council Waterman.
You've been telling us in various ways about PFAS for the 5.5 years I've been on council. And I just want to say how much I appreciate that. First, I had no idea what you were talking about. But you've kind of prepared us for where we are today. And so for that, thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, and
Courtney,
yeah, apologize again for running a little bit late.
look forward to seeing those fees.
I'd like to thank Mason and Deb again for coming each night, and yeah, very much appreciate all of your hard work and effort and yeah, and expertise. Thank you so much. And so we do have, we could vote out the funding for and have a discussion about the laser light show tonight. There isn't a rush. I don't know if we want to have that discussion tonight or if we want to talk about it 2 weeks.
I would say if there's no rush, we should probably wait.
Sounds good. Okay.
May I? I know I'm not part of your committee. So there is no rush on that, because I thought where did I read we had to stop fundraising? Right? Did I read that somewhere?
I couldn't
You
hear
don't, and I reached out to the mayor earlier today.
So there is
to
no
talk about
rush?
it. No.
Okay. So I wanted to make sure you guys didn't go home and that you had the discussion tonight if we need that funding. I'm just kidding. Okay. Anyway.
So with that said, I move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned at 9:28.
Thanks,
Thank you so
Mason and
much.
Deb.
Communities.
Thank you.